Welcome, everyone. So, if you've ever stared at a completely abstract philosophical essay prompt and just felt this massive wave of panic wash over you, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, this explainer is on a mission. We're going to transform that abstract, kind of intimidating UPSC essay into a highly structured, totally conquerable challenge. We're not here to give you some rigid formula to memorize. Instead, we're going to build a flexible thinker's toolkit that you can use to unlock literally any topic they throw at you. Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the philosophical shift, then break down the anatomy of an essay. After that, we'll build out the thinker's toolkit. And finally, we'll apply all of this to a really fascinating theme: change, permanence, and identity.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the philosophical shift.
The hard data here paints a pretty wild picture of how this exam has evolved. If we rewind back to 2014, the exam heavily favored concrete general studies topics. But right around 2018, things really began to shift. Fast forward to 2022, and those fact-based topics practically vanished, replaced almost entirely by abstract philosophical inquiries. So relying purely on factual recall, yeah, that just isn't going to cut it anymore.
Which brings us to Section 2, anatomy of an essay.
Since the topics are so abstract now, your structure has to be rock solid. But think of this not as a strict rulebook, but more like a flexible framework. Step 1 is your introduction, which needs to immediately hook the reader. Step 2, the body, well, that's your heavy lifter. It's going to take up about 75% of your essay space with rich, multidimensional analysis. And finally, Step 3 is your conclusion, where you deliver a cyclical closure that beautifully loops back to your opening thought. To show you the power of a strong Step 1, let's look at an actual introduction written by a top performer, Satyam Gandhi. The prompt was, "Legislative measures alone are not enough to ensure women's safety." Now, instead of starting out with dry statistics or some boring legal definition, he used a poignant personal anecdote about a woman named Sudha. He instantly grounded this broad, abstract concept into a deeply relatable human reality. I mean, that is exactly how you grab someone's attention right out of the gate. You know, as a writer, you actually have a really well-stocked pantry of introduction types to choose from. You could go with a personality-based intro, drawing on the life of a famous figure. You might use a powerful quotation to establish authority early on. You could drop a surprising fact or report to anchor the reader in concrete data. Or, exactly like we just discussed, you can use a relatable anecdote. The real trick here is just picking the strategy that best connects your reader to whatever specific philosophical theme you happen to be tackling.
Moving right along to Section 3, the thinker's toolkit.
So, how do we actually write about philosophy without being philosophy scholars? Well, it requires a major mindset shift. Your general studies knowledge, all those historical events, economic data, the Fox you've studied, it hasn't suddenly become useless. Not at all. Instead, its role has completely changed. It's no longer the main subject of your essay. It is now the vital, tangible evidence that you are going to use to prove your abstract arguments. To really master this, you need to prepare your toolkit around recurring universal themes. Think big ideas like truth, power, or happiness. For every theme, gather a few core thinkers or quotes. Next, you'll want to prep about 5 to 7 multidimensional, real-world examples spanning history, society, and economics. And finally, you have to master the art of deconstruction. That basically means taking an abstract quote, like happiness is the path, and breaking it down. What does this mean economically? What does it mean psychologically? If you build this toolkit, I promise you, you will literally never run out of insightful things to say.
And that brings us to our final stop, Section 4, change, permanence, and identity.
Let's see how all of this builds into an actual essay. We can introduce this grand theme using a technique we like to call thinking like Socrates. Instead of just making a bold statement, we ask a probing question. If our memory is what gives us our identity, what happens when it's lost? Like, if a celebrated war hero gets a head injury and forgets all his brave deeds, has he ceased to be a hero? By asking this, we instantly challenge the reader to stop and think really deeply about what actually makes us who we are in a world of constant change. Once we have our reader hooked with that question, we bust out our toolkit for evidence. We can juxtapose ancient philosophy with modern corporate history. On one hand, we have Gautam Buddha's teaching that the self is an ever-changing wave, a pattern of energy rather than a solid, fixed thing. And on the flip side, we have Kodak. Believe it or not, Kodak actually invented the digital camera back in 1975. But they stubbornly clung to their permanent identity as a film company. They totally resisted impermanence, and it led directly to their tragic bankruptcy in 2012. It's a perfect way to use a real-world example to prove a deep philosophical point.
From there, we can shift our lens over to the modern economy and anchor this whole concept of identity to the electric vehicle revolution. Think about a traditional motor company for a second. If it completely replaces its loud, mechanical, internal combustion engine with a silent battery and software, is it still a car company, or has it changed its very essence just to survive, morphing into a tech and battery company? Highlighting this shows the examiner that you can track highly abstract concepts straight into cutting-edge economic realities.
By deconstructing the theme across all these different dimensions, your essay just becomes incredibly rich. Politically, we can take a totally neutral look at the one nation, one election debate as a tension of identity. Is the country's core identity a diverse union or a single polity? Socially, we can look at the fluid reimagining of family structures, like the rise of solo parenting. And ecologically, we could point to the decline of the house sparrow in urban centers like Lucknow, which is a really stark loss of ecological permanence. Suddenly, your essay is well-rounded and just incredibly well-supported.
Finally, we can push the essay straight into the future by bringing in a technological dimension. You see, for centuries, our identity was this deeply internal thing, our memories, our individual consciousness. But today, we're seeing the explosive rise of AI digital twins, these virtual avatars that can perfectly mimic human preferences and speech. We are quite literally outsourcing the very process of self-discovery to algorithms. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought to ponder, and honestly an excellent way to conclude your essay. In an era of digital outsourcing, where a machine can replicate your exact behaviors, your speech, and your choices, what truly remains of your permanent, authentic self? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating framework with me today. Use this toolkit, embrace the abstract, and go start building your own brilliant arguments.